Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. So we were talking about initial impressions and the culture of excellence. Is there anything more that you'd want to add about how you perceive the current, or maybe did those initial impressions prove to be accurate? Is there anything more to?
The other part of the culture that I think was critical and that is still very much ingrained in how we operate is it was always seen and perceived by those who had been around for a while that part of their mission was to pass their knowledge and understanding along to the next generation of journalists. Mm-hmm. You can go to journalism school and you can learn good things in journalism school, but it's in the doing where you really learn. And so there's always been a culture of teaching and mm-hmm. coaching and mentorship that's been really important.
That's really interesting. Do you think that was the case at many newspapers?
Yeah, I think that was pretty common.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
can we take a quick break? I just need some water. I forgot to.
Oh yeah, sure. Yep.
I'll be
ahead.
2 minutes.
Yep.
Okay, we're back.
Okay, good. Okay, I just got some water myself. Okay, so obviously there were a lot of changes, and the current has gone through a big period of change and transition since those early years in the late 80s, early 90s. So what are some, I know it's a very wide open question, but what would be some of the things you'd want to talk about as some of the very big changes that you've observed at the current as it adapted to the digital era?
Well, do you want to just talk first about that change and sort of how that played out in the news at the current
Sure.
and at newspapers, and sort of then we can talk about what the sort of ripple effects.
Right. Sure. That makes sense. Yeah. Start bigger. Yeah.
Sequentially. So I don't think that those in the news industry understood in the mid 90s the extent of the changes that were about to wash over all of us. The sheer magnitude of change that the internet and the digital experience would bring
Right.
was unimaginable to many in 1995 when we first started to talk about the internet. And in the late 90s, as we sort of started talking about a website, it was seen by many as another distribution channel. So we had a print distribution channel, and now we're going to have this digital distribution channel. The people who, built the great powerhouses of the internet, Facebook and Google and Twitter, understood that it wasn't just about a different way of conveying out information. It was a sea change in how people understood the world, how they related to each other, how they took in information, and how they shared information. So the changes, and I'm not going to, spend a lot of time here talking about that because we all have witnessed those changes. We all walk around with phones in our pockets now. But the sheer magnitude of those changes was not really foreseen. And so the industry did not adapt quickly enough. We let others sort of take the lead in change, and we spent too long, and I don't say we at the current, I mean we, the industry. Yeah. We spent too long trying to protect the franchise of print, instead of embracing this new world and really understanding it. And that had many, many consequences. I'd say that the two most dramatic were when we finally began really adapting and understanding the interactive space and what that was going to mean in terms of news. We were behind.
Behind what? Behind other papers or behind?
No. We were behind the Facebooks and the Googles.
Sure.
In terms of technology and information dissemination. So we were several steps back in that race. It also, you asked earlier about competition. Well, now we went from having a virtual lock on the market to all of a sudden it is now this incredibly diffuse marketplace. And we've seen the consequences of that both on the news and the advertising side. So now you had all of a sudden, if you wanted to start a newspaper, all you need is a website and a laptop, right? So the point of entry and the price of entry into publishing dropped. So you had all these new players flooding into the world. You know, you used to have a building and a printing press, right? You didn't need that anymore. So now you have all these people who can become publishers and who did become publishers. More important in some ways on the advertising side, on the monetization side. So you take these 500,000 people in Greater Hartford up until, you know, the mid 90s, the Hartford Courant's the best way to get to all of them. These technology companies, as we now know, we're not sharing information out. They were taking information in. They were surveillance organizations. They were gathering information. Every time you clicked on a story, every time you clicked on an ad, every time you liked a post on Facebook, you were giving information to a digital publisher that could then use that information to help target advertising and marketing campaigns for clients. So all of a sudden you don't need 500,000 people in Greater Hartford because you can find the 5,000 you want. You know what your market looks like and how much money they're willing to spend and what their proclivities are. Now you have a way to go get them. You don't need to get the message out to as many people if you can target that message to the right audience. And that's been the dramatic sea change in advertising. And so what that did was it completely undercut the financial model of newspapers, which were built heavily on print advertising.
Which it has been that way probably for forever. That model was getting paid advertising.
For a very long time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that just wiped out the model. And it happened very quickly. Once that shift started to happen, it happened very quickly. You also lost readers because now people weren't reading, not as many people were reading print newspapers. People were reading websites. People are going online. People are getting their news from their Facebook. People are getting their news from emails from their friends. All of a sudden you have, 18,000 ways to get information online. Not as many people are going to sit around and read a paper.
But, I'm thinking about it, and wondering, cause, I lived through all of that too, obviously as a consumer. And all of those other places that were taking up the reader's attention, though, they weren't necessarily substitutes for local news. They were other kinds of news. So it's interesting that a news organization like the Current is the premier reporter of what's happening locally, but that's not enough to sustain this change? Because I don't think